Well, does everything that you do seem urgent? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you got a question for me, I want to invite you to go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. At the top of the page, there is a link that says Ask Bob. Just send me an email, and I'll get you taken care of. It's very simple. Love to be of help to you. Just go to the website, send it in. We'll get you taken care of. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Well, we had what seemed like a short weekend, or starts off like a long weekend, always seems like a short weekend. They just go by so fast. We wanted to keep an eye on what was going on in the Middle East so I could come back with an update for you on Monday. Really there's some things that have happened, nothing too shocking, just because ceasefires are messy. And there's always one of the two sides violating it, and basically the other one goes, you better stop doing that. And then they fire at them, and they fire back, and that's kind of what's going on. Except for the realization that what was really going on in the Strait of Hormuz was not really what was being communicated on media. And supposedly, President Trump had everything under control, under lockdown. They created big blockades, and everything was supposed to be under our control. And we find out that it really wasn't that way, and that Iran really had control of who was getting in and getting out. I think they might have let a couple of tankers in, but what a mess. And then they came back and they said, after President Trump said, we're close to a deal with Iran, which I still don't think that we are, and I don't think that it's going to happen. But that's just my opinion. The Iranians said, you've got to remove all your blockades, and then on our side, President Trump wants to take all of the nuclear building materials and remove them. And so the bickering goes on and on. Supposedly on Wednesday, the ceasefire is over with, if it doesn't get pushed off and postponed again. These delays seem to be quite the negotiating tactic on our side. And we'll see what happens. I think the markets really know what to think, what to do at this stage. And it's a tough one to manage. So there is your update. Not much, but I promised you that I would keep you updated and as to what's going on in the Middle East. Last week, we talked about financial procrastination and how this was probably the one big thing that ties everything together that prevents people from really doing what they value and handling money in a good and effective way. And we talked about, in order to get everything in order, you have to make the list of all the habits you need to change. I mean, if you're sitting on one side of the fence and you need to be on the other side of the fence, and you need to be in a particular situation, and that's what you value the most, and you need to change a lot of the habits that are keeping you on the wrong side of the fence. So you've got to start with a grand master list of everything that needs to change in your life, the habits, the beliefs, and really do some self-growth. And of course, and most importantly, do this while in a very strong discipline of prayer, that God's with you, God's taking you through that adventure together. And that's where it starts, and that's what will get you where God wants you to be. That's always kind of the situation that we have this grand idea of where we're supposed to be, how things are supposed to go, and everything that we think is the most important thing. When if we would take a step back and say, not what I want, but God, what do you want for my life? And I think that you get a very different outcome. Maybe you don't get a different outcome at all. But if you've got to ask that question in order to improve your today and better your financial tomorrow. And that's exactly what we're talking about. It really comes down to what you doing what you value the most. And I would suggest that for most people, and I tell this story because I think it's a great illustration. Had a doctor and his wife come in to my office one time, and the couple said to me, we make really good money, but we at the end of the day, at the end of the paycheck, it seems like we've spent all that money up to the end of the month, and we're just waiting on another check to come in. So many people live like that. And I told them, sit down and write down everything that you spend money on and come back and see me in 3 months. And so the couple comes back, and the doctor looks at me as if he had just, he was very, very angry, very mixture of emotions. And he looked up at me and he said, "We spend $2,500 a month." And I said, "Well, what do you spend $2,500 a month on?" He goes, "Eating out." And he goes, "I really, it disgusts me." And I said, "You shouldn't be disgusted about it. It's what you value. What we value. If you want to see what you value, I like this illustration. If you really want to see what you value when it comes to money, is open up the checkbook or your debit card or your American Express, wherever you charge the most, and rank where your money's going. And you'll see what you value. If you want to value being a tither, but you're not participating in tithing, and that's obviously at the bottom of the list, you might have good intentions, but if you truly valued it, you would move things around to bring that into its prominent place that it deserves to be on the list. It's all coming down to get past this procrastination, because you will want to do it today. You're not going to want to put it off tomorrow. That's how important it, and that's how alive it's going to become in your life. And it can be a powerful, powerful place to be. But it starts off with that grand master list. I was thinking about this yesterday. I mean, you can apply this to any aspect into your life, and any aspect that you want to see change, God-given change in your life, and God-inspired change in your life. And as I talk about that, I just think how powerful that is. So one of the things we talked about, if you want to make this list, and like I said, you could be driving along with me right now, listen to the program and say, I mean, there's some things I want to change financially, but I feel pretty good about where I am, what I'm doing, where I'm going, and the discipline and all the good habits. Well, you can always apply the same thing I'm talking to any area of your life. And that is what the beautiful thing about it is. So we talked about Dr. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And as I said last time we talked about this book, if you are just now hearing about it, you got to go check it out. And it's a book that will usher in changes in your life. The way he describes things and goes through how to affect change. And it really does come down to our habits. It's so very important. If we could, we'll do that at some point, is talk just about habits, because you've got to get control of the bad habits in your life. And you've got to get those habits shifted to where they support where you want to go, not take you where you really don't want to go, but you go anyway. Last Thursday when we talked about this, one of the things that I promised is that I would write a piece and put it on prudentmoney.com, which will be there about half an hour after we get done here. And it shows the visual of what I'm talking about. And it goes through it step by step. And I would encourage you to go to the website and read this, because this will really make you look at things differently. And it's the 4 quadrants of effective time management. And really, if you think about it, that's the problem, is that's where we're spending our time. Are we putting things off of importance to tomorrow, or are we effectively spending our time? So there is 4 different quadrants, and you'll see this if you go to the website. Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2, Quadrant 3, Quadrant 4. And basically what it illustrates, Dr. Covey was showing that this is where we spend the majority of our time. You can look at it and you can see. And you can think, well, Quadrant 1 looks like where I spend a lot of my time. And if that's the case, then you're probably stressed and burned out. But Quadrant 2 is where I want to spend time. And people who are in Quadrant 2 are genuinely in a good mood. They're managing their stress. They are organized. Everything they're doing they value, and they're following a vision, and they're on a spot on time to get there. If you're in Quadrant 3, you're sort of doing some of that balance, but you're also have some short-term focus versus long-term focus issues. You're putting things off, and you feel a little bit out of control. Just not the greatest place to be, but if you're not going to be in Quadrant 2, probably a good place to be. Then there's Quadrant 1, where everything's burning, deadline-driven. You go from one fire to putting out another fire to putting out another fire, because all of these problems, they ended up becoming a problem because you weren't doing the things in Quadrant 2. So we'll get back to this. We're up against a break. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory in the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Listen, you can go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com, and you can go to the top of the website where it says Ask Bob, and send a question in. I love to get the questions. Been getting quite a few questions about all kinds of things. So make sure that you send that in and we can communicate. Love to get to know you. Love to get to know what's going on. And if I can help, I want to be of help. Today we're talking about the 4 quadrants of effective time management. This is a powerful concept. And I'll tell you, I really feel like God led me down this path to really take a good, cold, hard look at this and do some changes in my own life. I feel very strongly about that. And so this is on the website, prudentmoney.com. Let me take that back. By about 4 o'clock, it'll be on the website. And you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And these 4 quadrants, and let me talk about them in a different way. Quadrant 1 means that you have important and urgent things going on in your life. So very, very important, very high stakes, very urgent. Quadrant number 2 means that you have important things, but that you're taking care of, and they're not urgent. And then quadrant 3 means you got kind of a little bit of both. And but you're falling on the crisis management side that builds to quadrant 1. Quadrant 4 is not important, not urgent. It's you're kind of dealing with things, and you're putting a lot of things off tomorrow. You are looking for pleasant activities. Things end up really being time wasters. I said in my piece that I wrote today, if Dr. Covey was still around, he would probably write something like, "This is people who go to social media to escape. Go to clean up your email box. Is that the most effective thing you can do in a day, in a working day's period?" And so here's how it works. Is that what the ideal thing Dr. Covey writes about is he says you got to be in quadrant 2. That's where you need to live. So important things, important habits, important tasks, but not urgent. And it builds a foundation so you can handle the things that happen that can keep you into quadrant 2. I mean, relationship, some of the ones that he lists are relationship building, planning, recreation, prevention, because that's the thing. If you are doing the right things, you keep a crisis at bay. You don't have to crisis management. You don't have to have the risks and the stress that you have in quadrant 1 if you do the right things to keep it at bay. For results, he talks about balance, discipline, and few crises. But what ends up happening is we fall from that quadrant 2 down to the quadrant 3, and where it says they're not really not important things, but they're urgent things. And then we develop into quadrant 1, where it says crisis, pressing problems, deadline driven. I don't know about you, but that's not where I want to be. And the results, stress, burnout, crisis management, always putting out fires. And you may be going, that's me. That's me. Well, you've got to figure out, what do I have to change to get back into quadrant 2? It's very simple. Now, this is what's funny to me, is that quadrant 4 is, he says and writes in the book, that this is where people go to get away from quadrant 1. It's the escape. It's the time waster. It's social media, and everything that can just get me away from all this. It's and I can be guilty of this. I can get in the middle of something, have stress happening, and kind of not necessarily crisis management, but just real stressful period of the day, and next thing I know, I'm flipping through email, which is not the best use of time when you're in the heat of the day. Unfortunately, the best use of time is in and out of the work areas. If you get that lost in email. But these are the 4 quadrants, and I think it's if you really study them, and I believe he has a separate book on this because it is such a powerful concept. But go check it out, and I would definitely recommend that you read the book. And this will help you to get back on track. And it will also help you as you are working to figure out, okay, what can I do differently? Let's face it, if you're operating out of Quadrant 1, you're operating out of Quadrant 3, you're in Quadrant 4, you're not doing the things that really are your best moments. You're wasting time, you're staying in crisis. And I know there's so many people like that. But if you take that and you rearrange that and you get into Quadrant 2, you're going to realize that fixes a lot of your financial procrastination problems. Because financial procrastination comes down to two things. Fear of something. That's why we're putting it off. And second, bad habits that don't really support you. And it can be a mind-changing, life-changing type information. That's one of the things I love about books, is that you get the opportunity to listen to some of the best advice, either through the author's own experiences or the author's of observation of people's experiences, and you can learn from it, and you can change from it, and it's just very, 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 very powerful. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know, I do appreciate it. Listen, if you want to read a copy of the piece that I wrote on this, it shows the 4 quadrants. I would highly encourage you to go check it out. It's at prudentmoney.com. It'll be there around 4 o'clock. We'll have it up. And you can see the actual quadrants and what we've been talking about. That's one of those things where you need a visual. So I was looking through quite a lot of the resources that I see, and noticing that the number of articles that are about IRS refunds, and the reason that most people are getting really high refunds that they weren't even expecting, and a lot of it was because some part of the new tax code, new regulations didn't go into effect till later, so you're getting a kind of backup taxes paid back to you. And so the question is, well, what do I do with it? And we saw back when the government was just dealing out money to everybody, giving it away when we were in the middle of COVID, most people saved that money because they were scared of what was going on. And what I find interesting today is that the government seems to be starting to go through the same process. I was reading there's 3 or 4 different bills in the House that are being discussed. Nothing formal as of yet, but what it does is it gives you like the tariff refunds, and why don't you take that money and pay off some of the debt? It makes no sense to me. But anyway, I won't get off on all that. But the tariff refunds and just all kinds of, $2,000 here, $3,000 here, and the tax refunds. Let's address the tax refunds first. I would encourage you to, and I know a lot of people set up their taxes this way. They have way more withheld than they need, and they get a big sum of money in January, and they have a vacation fund, they call it, or whatever. I personally believe instead of getting that big chunk of money, it makes so much more sense for that money to be spread out over 12 months. You get that money back. You don't give the IRS a tax-free loan, and increase your tax flow, put a spending plan together, and your finances will be so much more organized when you go through that process. That's what I would do if you're getting way more back than you thought that you were, versus spending it. Number 2, I would change that going forward. The lump sum that you did get, or the lump sums that you might get from any government program that you weren't expecting. I mean, the government's acting like we're in total crisis mode with the financial situation. We're not any more crisis mode than we've always been because of the irresponsibility of people making decisions for us. That's another story. The best place, I think, if you're going to get that money is not to spend it once again, but put it in an emergency account. Build up that emergency account and wait until we see how we get through this next period of the economy, of the war, of inflation, and all the things that are happening. So just a couple of things to think about as you receive this in future amounts in the future. But once again, that blog will be on the website in about half an hour, and you can go see the visual of the 4 quadrants and what that all means. And this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.